will accept the root reflection,
Yeah.
how do we ameliorate the actual root cause?
Sure. So that's what we should be talking about. So I think a lot of this starts with early education in the country. First of all, a lot of this even goes to concerns about inequality. I think that every kid who's born in this country, starting at the age of 4, if not younger, should have access to the best possible school they can, regardless of what their financial background is.
Love that.
I mean, it's the truth, right? Universal school choice. That happens, by the way, not at the federal level. It's part of when I'm thinking about my own next step. That happens at the state level. That's really where these changes happen. I think that restoring at least a norm in the country of a solid family foundation. Does that mean that somebody who grows up in a broken family environment or a single parent household can't achieve great success? No, of course not. But all else equal, it tends to be from a stable family, generally 2-parent upbringing, you're going to be able to jump higher if you're jumping from a ground that isn't shaking, but a ground that's stable. So I think it starts early. And I think a disproportionate focus on high quality education starting young, on measuring that achievement starting young, and then some cultural shift. And you tend to get more of what you valorize as a culture, right? Yes. So I think it's fantastic that we valorize a lot of different things in American culture that are great because we produce great comedians. We produce great athletes. We have historically produced great scientists and engineers. It's great. You get more of what you valorize. But what I've seen a little bit that concerns me in probably the last 20 years, you could blame some of this on the woke left, but it's not exclusively at the feet of the woke left, is penalizing excellence. Right? Penalizing the person who works hard and wins, and instead rewarding the victim. And I think that if you reward victimhood, you get more victimhood. And if you penalize excellence and hard work, you're going to get less excellence and less hard work. So I think it's going to be a combination of policies that allow people to have access to the best possible education at a young age and start measuring and rewarding for success earlier. Merit-based pay for teachers, not just everybody just getting the same thing for treating kids like they're on an assembly line, but actually measuring and pinpointing the people who are putting kids on even a little bit of a trajectory that's different when they're 4 years old. By the time they're at 12th grade, you could run a truck through that, okay? So those increments of difference starting even young, that's a big freaking difference. And then to create a culture that, we don't need to create it, we just need to revive it, because it is our culture. To celebrate whoever's the best, to reward them, to celebrate that in every domain, right? Not just academics to athletics, physical excellence. I actually, to some other controversy 2 years ago, favored bringing back what's called the presidential fitness test. They used to have middle school kids go through that. They take that away now. Right? How many push-ups can these kids do? I mean, we don't valorize that type of physical excellence. We should. I love sports. I mean, I was a 4-year varsity athlete myself. It sometimes can make you a better thinker too. But we should embrace excellence in all of its forms rather than this thing that we kind of teach our kids to do nowadays. And I'm not criticizing anybody else. Like, my kids grow up in a really different environment than I grew up in. Yeah. And I'm somewhat concerned about that. It makes me think a lot as a parent about how do you cultivate that same environment where we participation trophy culture, right? We should have trophies for the winners, not participation trophies. That was America, right? That was the America that produced greatness. I worry a little bit about taking the guy who's a striver and using that and make that a negative connotation rather than celebrating the person who's going to put their head down and work hard, be it at basketball, be it at the violin, be it at math, or be it in the science competitions. And I do think that that's a culture that is American at its core. Maybe we've lost our way on that a little bit. I think we have. But bring back the culture that produced greatness at every time where we've been at our best, right? The country that put the man on the moon, the country that was the country of the pioneers, the explorers, the Lewis and Clark expeditions, for God's sake.
Merit-based pay for teachers is interesting. I've never heard of that before.
How do you implement that?
Super required.
Yeah.
Teachers' unions are an obstacle. Yeah, I think that there's an obstacle.
Yeah.
But I think that the idea that you're going to have it's participation trophy culture. In a certain sense, you have participation trophy culture for kids. Yeah. We can't just have participation trophy culture for the people who are educating our kids either.
Question about that. Should unions be able to negotiate against the state?
I think that in certain domains, it's uncontroversial that they shouldn't. Public school teachers, if you're unionizing as a public school teacher, who are you unionizing against?
And also,
against the very people you're supposed to represent.
But also, who is rewarding that union? Somebody who's going to be in office for 2-4 years, and then they move on, so they don't have to deal with the repercussions of bad policy.
Which is totally different from different kinds of unions, right? Private sector unions came up about fighting against monopoly power, against capitalistic consolidation. But public sector unions, even you had FDR, I think, actually, who was a big pro-union guy that expressed a lot of skepticism about public sector unions.
Yeah.
And then you could talk about, I would put police and fire. That's in a different category because there are a lot of concerns that relate to how they're insured or protected in the case of putting their own lives on the line. But let's just start with the easiest example where I think most people agree. I don't think public teachers unions make sense.
And why is
I think public teachers unions means you're unionizing against the very people you're supposed to serve.
For example?
Kids who you're teaching, right?
How are you unionizing against kids?
What are they advocating for?
Well, what you're advocating for, you advocate for summer break. Let's just start with that.
So you're advocating for...
And let's talk about summer break. This is a super boring subject to a lot of people. I think it's a super important subject. I've included this in one of my earlier books, is you actually see regress when a kid finishes the school year in the spring versus when they show up in the fall. But kids from well-to-do families, that regress is really small because they're able to pay for and seek out high engagement activity over those 3 months. From poorer or less well-to-do school districts, that's where the gap actually grows, just the regress when they show up in the fall. That's just one example. I think it is a nice perk of being a teacher that you have summer break, but we should take a look at what produces the best results. And conversely, the very best aren't rewarded. Let's say you're actually doing the best job amongst your pack of peers of teachers in teaching kids how to excel in math and science and reading ability and critical thinking in a way that's measurable. That person still gets paid the same salary, which I think is way too low right now. I was just
going to say that. Teachers are severely underpaid. So you think getting rid of unions, the state's going to be like, let's pay them more?
I think the best ones would actually get paid more money. Especially it's in the context of a true market-based system where the people at the level of the family have the ability, whether they can afford it or not, they're able to, with a voucher or with a school, educational savings account, able to choose to go to a better school. Absolutely. And there's good evidence for this.
I think you have too much faith in state budgets. They are trying to cut
faith.
I
don't think it happens. I don't think it happens magically.
So I guess
I'm with you. It doesn't happen magically, but I think that great leaders can make a difference. I think good leaders with the right policies at the level of the state can fix this problem. And here's why. This is not going to the moon. Going to the moon is a problem of physics. And not every natural problem has a man-made solution. This is a man-made problem. And every man-made problem has a man-made solution. Okay. I believe that.
And if we value education as highly as you'd like, then that's the budget you cut last. You see what I'm saying?
Well, it's not just the budget.
Don't value it already.
It's about how you use it.
That's an issue.
It's about how you use it. So take the money to administer the bureaucracy, put that money in people's pockets, and allow them to actually get to the best possible education they can get to. Either renegotiate the union contracts or maybe get rid of them altogether, in a way that allows for merit-based pay.
Doesn't that create just smart schools and dumb schools?
Well, we're here in New York City, close to downtown. You got the best traders at a Wall Street firm. Yeah. If they make most profit for the firm, which is their mission, they get paid more rather than the guy who didn't. Why would we want to operate our schools, in a way that's the opposite principle?
How would you decide what merit is for teachers? Yeah,
and there's upsides and downsides to just be slaves of the test, right? Nobody just wants to solve for one metric. Right. But, there's going to be no perfect system. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. But is a system that has a combination of objective metrics, even if the metrics aren't perfect, better than one that has none at all? I think it is strictly better, right? So I think we can't let the fact that you're going to have some flaw in whatever metric you use to say that therefore we're not going to use any at all.
Don't be paralyzed trying to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Let the perfect not be the enemy of the good, right? And I do think that we're not at the good right now when it comes to doing justice by our kids in preparing them to be competitive. And I think that's part of where the victimhood culture comes from. But even in a state, if you train your kids to be actually prepared to compete, then they don't think of themselves as victims.
But I think we also have to consider that sometimes teachers are at the mercy of the families that these kids are born into.
Absolutely.
And we can't punish teachers because, they have a class of 30 kids who are all from single parent households.
I agree with you.
It's like it's not their fault. They have them 8 hours a day.
And that was the other point I made. So those would be the two biggest changes for the country, is restoring a rock solid family foundation as the norm.
How do you do that through policy?
Yeah, some of it is at least eliminate the disincentives to do it, right? I think those are accidents. I don't think that somebody nefariously did this to the point we were talking about earlier. Yeah. But there are weird distortions where actually people can make more money by not having a man in the house than to have a man in the house. I think those are accidents of arithmetic and the way that the Great Society under Lyndon Johnson worked out. So that's not going to solve all the problem, but at least start with eliminating the disincentives.